That then led me to understand that what has actually happened is the most colossal distortion on what I perceive to be the most profound and important information for humanity. It's the whole of society that's screwed up with it. They have to come to understand their own sovereignty. The distortion has come about in a way through a belief system, through a mindset, a kind of screwed up psychosis. It's less about the power of the people, but more about the fact that humanity needs to get itself straightened out. There are hints everywhere to the proper, authentic rule of law. The people really need to understand what free society looks like, how it's supposed to function.
Hey guys, it's Gavin here for Sovereign Empowerment, and we've got a great interview discussion here today. I'm joined by Damien, who you may recognise from the previous videos. The last one we talked about was the real Constitution. But we've got a first-time guest here, and it's a guy that you may recognise from other casts, a guy called Will Keyte. William, welcome. Very good to have you here. Thank you for your time. We're going to have a discussion about natural law. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm like a child amongst adults here with Damien and William. William, welcome. You could just let the folks that don't know who you are.
Okay. First of all, I must apologise about my light management. The sun has come out and I thought it was going to be a bit flatter today, but it's gone a bit mad. But we mustn't complain, must we? Anyway, my name is William Keyte, and I suppose I've been awake to the fact that the world is not quite as we were brought up to believe it is. I suppose that occurred around 2006, something like that. So it's been quite a long journey for me. But compared with the sort of the recent wake up over the crazy circus of the last 3 or 4 years, that's quite a long time. And I started that with, before that, in the normal world, I was a teacher. I was a musician, actually, originally, did a music degree, and I went into teaching, and I did quite a number of years in that, and then I went into business and IT, and to some extent coding as well. So I've got quite a lot of feet in lots of different things. But I came to the realization around that sort of time, 2006, that things are not quite as we're brought up to believe through mainstream channels of information, the normal channels that we learn things through schools and universities and so on. And I started to look at that. And initially that was about the pharmaceutical industry and all of that. And then very quickly, I realized that can't possibly be operating like that in isolation. So I started to shift outside that and started to look at geopolitics, the fun and game going across the world in the way that shadow governments operate, organizations that are outside the normal rule of law operate. And I started to look at things like secret and semi-secret societies that run in the background, such as the Fabian Society, the Society of the Elect, the Round Table groups, and started to do some quite deep research in that and how they're starting to bring about policy. They've been doing it for decades, if not centuries, and realized that there are strings being pulled behind the scenes, collectivist organizations, and we can get into that. But yeah, that was what I began to discover. And then, of course, that naturally took me into the proper, authentic rule of law. Well, how is that supposed to operate? Are there meant to be checks and balances placed on the governing system of the country or not? And if there never were meant to be checks and balances placed on the governing system of this country, and it was all just pretense, then all right, I'll go and look at something else and go and deal with how we're going to deal with this in another way. But if actually it seems, as in fact I discovered, that actually that was done for real, it was an authentic effort to establish limitation placed on the governing system of our country, absolutely correctly done. And of course, that then led me to understand that what has actually happened is the most colossal distortion. And so I've been on that journey ever since of unraveling that and why it is that the authentic rule of law has been distorted. How has that come about? And getting deeply into that material. So that's me, a former teacher who's basically just spending all his time getting into this stuff now. And I'm now delivering courses and writing things and managing 2 websites and doing some public speaking and all of that sort of stuff on what I perceive to be the most profound and important information for humanity. I just want to get to the stuff that really is going to matter I'm not interested in looking at what is often referred to as the plane of effect, which is just symptoms, isn't it? Really, because we get drawn into what we think are the things that are going wrong. They are things that are going wrong, but they're actually just effects. What we actually need to look at is the deep causes of that, and so that's me.
Brilliant. That's amazing. I didn't know a lot of that history as well, actually. There's a light bulb moment where you realize something's wrong, and then it becomes
Yes.
a bit of a personal obsession to get to truth. And it's really just about the pursuit of truth, isn't it? Is getting harder and harder because there's so many different groups out there, and some of them are there on purpose to misdirect and sow seeds of doubt, etc. So we're going to talk about natural law today, and for me, it's a really interesting topic because in my awakening journey, I've taken a slightly different route with a lot of people. Damien and I met at the earlier stages of both of our journeys, and Damien went down a different route looking at the Constitution, and I went headfirst into the legal system. And I'm at this point where it's just so corrupted. It's so corrupt. But what is the point of using this obviously tyrannous, corrupted system whereby you can look back in history now and pinpoint exact points where treason took place, which to me just completely invalidate what we've got today. And so where we are in obvious tyranny and we know there's an agenda at play, I think the conversation of natural law is quite apt because it's the single truth, I think, that really, if we're looking to change things and build a free humanity, that for me is the cornerstone.
Yes.
And so it'd be great to just get into talking about that, because what is it? What is natural law? The term I've heard before, but what is it actually?
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Now, I suppose the first thing that I would say, and some people would find it a little bit uncomfortable for me to say this, but having gone through practically every rabbit hole and every conspiracy story that there is out there, it's funny. I get people emailing me even now and saying things like, "But actually, Will, do you know about the Strawman?" Yes, I've been down that route. The whole CUSIP number and all the stuff to do with the trust. I'm fully aware of that. But actually, I'm now coming to the conclusion that it's not really about that anymore. I'm starting to change the reframe from what I've discovered and what I've seen. I'm now returning to a very different position on what is the true nature of the wrongdoing and what we perceive as the conspiracy. Am I saying that there is no conspiracy? Because a lot of people will say, Will is softening his position. I sense that some people are thinking that, and I'm not, actually. I'm absolutely aware of collective conspiracies, most unquestionably, and there will be people behind the scenes who will be definitely enjoying the direction, let's face it, that where it's going now, and will be capitalizing, if you like, on that power gain. Of course, that's going to be the case. There are always people like that with sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies to do that. But what I'm now saying is that the situation is much more nuanced and subtle than that. And what I'm really coming to the conclusion is that largely what is happening is that we're doing it to ourselves, a lot of this. And it's really more about our weakness and the fact that we are so easy to manipulate that has almost invited the situation to come about. So it's less about the power of the people as we perceive it now behind the scenes, but more about the fact that humanity needs to get itself straightened out and start to become a worthy adversary to this. And that's a very different way of characterizing the problem. Okay. And I would also say that, for example, is the entire legal system absolutely upside down and corrupt? No, it's not, actually. And you can see hints all the way through the way the system functions as to how it was meant to operate and how it was set up to operate. There are hints everywhere to the proper, authentic rule of law. A lot of people are making claims like, oh, every legal professional, I should say, in the system is absolutely corrupt and is aware of what's going on. And they use a secret language in court and all this kind of stuff. And it's absolutely not the case. And I've had many conversations with legal professionals who fundamentally believe that they are operating under the Constitution as they understand it. See, that's the key, right? So the distortion has come about in a way through a belief system, through a mindset, a kind of screwed up psychosis. And I would argue that isn't necessarily reserved to the people within the system. It's not the people in the system who are screwed up with that mindset, with that incorrect mindset. It's the whole of society that's screwed up with it. And the people within the system, in a way, are just the extension of those within society who have that mindset, right? What we're really coming around to seeing is that there is a kind of mental illness, a kind of psychosis that exists within humanity. And we might be able to come on later if we really get deep on this, that it's actually not really a psychosis and there is a purpose to it. But we'll get onto that a little bit later. But I see that as the key problem. That's really what the cause is, the fact that there's a kind of screwed up thinking, a rotten ideology at the basis of how people see the world and see, for example, how rights come about, what are obligations. So it's that really, I would argue, what that psychosis is. So natural law is the understanding that right and wrong behavior is objective. Now, a lot of people who are a little bit leaning towards a religion, a specific dogmatic religion, will go, yay, fantastic. It's God's laws and all the rest of it. And quite right, it is God's laws, and I'm not denying that at all. But it's important to understand that the laws of natural law, which is the laws that exist within the universe that govern the dynamics, the relationships between intelligent, sentient beings, if you like. The morality of how we interact is already governed by the universe. Now, how do I know that? How is that objective? It's objective by looking at the effect of behavior. There are certain behaviors that you can engage in towards others that will bring about positive karmic consequence, if you want to put it that way. Positive effects. It's a cause and effect system.
Yeah.
And there are behaviors that you can engage in that will bring about negative consequences. Okay, and I'm not just talking about how you do something not very nice to your neighbor and he gets angry with you and thumps you in the face. But the effects, the negative effects that I'm talking about are much more subtle than that. They're much more protracted. They take longer to come into effect, but they absolutely and most definitely do in ways that quite often we don't even spot as well, or don't even think about. And when you draw your attention to those effects, you start to realize, oh my God, yes, there are certain self-destructive patterns that we put into our lives and in the collective, into society generally, that bring about those negative karmic consequences. They naturally bring about conditions that are just spiraling downwards, that will accelerate that spiral downwards into a kind of oblivion, really.
Could you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so what we're doing is all the time, we're giving away our sovereignty and our power. And we need to get into what that is, okay? So the universe really requires us to be self-governing. It requires us to step up to the plate and take responsibility and to become trustworthy, to not only to ourselves, so that we can feel fulfilled in our lives and that we can begin to trust ourselves as well in what it is that we are doing and making good decisions for ourselves in our lives. But that's also essential for the others around us as well, and the people that we care about, the people that we love within our community and our families and whatever. We can't become that rock and something that we can be depended upon unless we take responsibility. And that means morally as well. Because if you're not moral internally, then you're not trustworthy. You can't be trusted and you can't be depended upon. Okay, so this is an important dynamic. Now, if you are giving away parts of yourself and you're consistently outsourcing parts of your lives because you're feeling you're in fear, or you're a bit ambivalent or a bit lazy or apathetic about things, and you'd rather somebody else take responsibility for that aspect of your life or whatever it is, and we do that in a surprising number of ways, then you cease to become responsible. But you're not responsible for the effects that come back at you because you didn't make those decisions yourself, right? And here we are, interestingly, on a day when we're all supposed to be voting how interesting that it's happened today in the youth voting in this important election at the moment. And what are we doing? We're absolutely outsourcing our own governance to others, to our representatives. And we're told all the time that's how it works in this country. That's how it's supposed to be. Well, it's not actually. We're supposed to take personal responsibility for things. And you certainly don't outsource your self-governance. That's one of the worst things that you could possibly do. Where am I going with that? What I'm saying then is we start to discover that actually, if you are wanting to become dependable as an individual, then you have to take that responsibility and become trustworthy. And a society made up of people who are consistently outsourcing aspects of their lives to others to take control of those things, whether it's the education of your children or it's the care of your elderly or whatever it may be, that is not the sign of a society that is taking personal responsibility. Okay, so what happens? So let's get back to natural law. So what's happening is that you're going to kick in, dynamics are going to come into play that you wouldn't have spotted, you wouldn't even think about. Okay, and that's what's happening. So we're giving away our power to government, and yet at the same time, we're wanting to wrestle it back again and saying, no, actually, government has got too much power and it's taking away our liberties. Well, one of the main ways that it takes away our liberties is that it transferred the way that law works. It's basically taken law away from the backing of morality and justice, and it's using law to back policy that has been dreamt up by an individual, a group of individuals, who've decided that they're going to put a policy in place which isn't anything about justice and morality, and we'll get into that in a minute. And it's really now that they're using law just simply to determine whether somebody is complying with a policy or not. And that's really nothing to do with justice, yeah? So what we have is a governing system now in this country that is all about enforcing policy. Because people who are in that system, and also most of the country, don't forget, believe that's how you run a fair and civilized society, by having majority rule and outsourcing your own individuality. And as I've discussed with you guys on the conversation before, and I've discussed this with Neil Oliver as well, and Neil brought up a really good example. He said you could have a situation where you've got 51% of the country who vote in a party that are going to put a certain policy into place. And you could have an enormous minorities, let's say, of 49%, who didn't want that policy at all. That 51% then gets into office and enforces that policy. And in order to enforce it, they put some kind of a law behind it to adhere to that policy. And so what you've got is 49% who didn't agree with that at all. It's nothing to do with morality, actually. It's just simply the fact that it's a policy of that group that wanted to get into office and managed to just by the skin of their teeth. But now we've got law backing it. So what's happened is potentially that 49% minority, which is vast, now potentially becomes criminalized if they refuse to go along with that. So it's essentially that is now no longer about morality. And what you're actually saying is that, I don't know, 30 million people have had their free will breached simply because we're enacting a policy on the basis of majority voting, right? So back to natural law, morality is all about conducting oneself. Okay, it's not about putting policy in place centrally. Yeah, it's purely about whether or not we are acting morally within our lives. And to go back to that objective, where I was saying that morality is actually objective, it absolutely is. And it's quite simply this. We have free will as individuals, and we can enact that free will, which basically means that we can do anything we like up to a certain naturally existing limitation that is put in place. And what is that limitation? The limitation exists within the universe as what we call equity, which is the idea that we're all equal before the law. Now, if we're all equal before the law, what that's really saying is that everybody has free will, but the naturally existing limitation that's placed on that free will is the existence of your neighbor's free will as well. So all it's saying is the extent of you enacting your free will, the limitation, not really a limitation actually, what it is a limitation of enacting your free will without you getting negative consequences back for going beyond a certain point. And what that point is where you start to use your free will to an extent where your neighbor is being prevented from using his free will, right? So what we're actually essentially putting together here, or trying to bring about as a concept in our minds, is my rights end where yours begin. That's the naturally existing limitation that exists within the universe. It's there, it's objective. It's really quite obvious, and you can demonstrate it through logic and reason.
Is it fair to say, well, sorry to interrupt,
Go on, Damien. Yeah.
that history itself is evidence of those karmic consequences that we're experiencing? So right throughout history, we prove that a moral society, that's what you're going to reap.
Yes. Completely correct. Exactly. So when a society starts the downward spiral, that is the sign that that society is taking on what we might call a collectivist ideology. And a collectivist ideology is really groupthink.
Studies show when a decision is made by a group, everyone feels more confident, even though the decision could be incredibly stupid.
Is this true?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Can't argue with that.
And the belief in the authority of the group, or the belief in the authority of government. Okay, so rather than an individualist ideology, which is that fundamental belief that everyone is self-determining as an individual, that we all have the right to be self-determining, the right to follow our purpose, our sense of purpose, our dharma, if you like, and understand that there are limitations placed on that, because it's through that is born the recognition of the fact that everybody else has that right to be self-determining too. Okay. Now, one of the big tricks that's been played here is that we're constantly told that to be an individualist is to be selfish because you're thinking about the individual, or that they're assuming that you're thinking about just yourself. Doesn't mean that at all. That's absolutely incorrect. An individualist, absolutely, and I hinted at it just there, fundamentally believes in leaving the other person alone, in not interfering with them. Yeah, I get to govern myself and to manage myself in the same way that I respect someone else to have the right to do the same without interference. So an individualist fundamentally is unselfish because they actually recognize the needs of other individuals to have that space and freedom to do the same. So the key here that we're getting is that collectivist ideology is about coercion. It's about force. It's about somebody or a group of people deciding for others what is best for them, whether they like it or not. And that is a deeply evil philosophy, and it's a self-destructive one, and it ultimately will bring a society down. That's where we're heading, because fundamentally we are falling into the traps of collectivism. So people will love the idea of individual rights when you explain it at the base principle level. When you say my rights end where another's begin, and you talk about equity, we're all equal before the law. They love it. People will agree with that and come on board with that straight away. What they won't spot is at the higher expression, they don't realize that in other moral conundrum within our life and within society, they don't realize that they are falling from individualism across into collectivism and collectivist thinking without spotting it. They don't see it. And that's the biggest problem. And so I've now got to a point now where, yes, I talk about the British Constitution a lot. And the reason why I do that is because the Constitution is a template, if you like, for supporting that ideology of individualism. It's absolutely fundamentally rooted in individualist ideas. And so therefore the Constitution is a pattern or a template to help us get back to that individualist ideology and live by it. It allows us to do that. Whereas this collectivist ideology is much more prevalent than people realize. We're way outside where we should be, and that's the root of the problem. So at the moment, I'm focusing on demonstrating and showing people where it is that we are falling into those traps of adopting collectivist thinking. That's where I'm going now with it all. Yeah.
So, Will, as individuals, what if we use our free will choice to come together as individuals? Is that okay? Is that
Absolutely brilliant.
like we choose to be part of that? Like we're choosing to be part of this discussion now.
Totally
I'm
right.
keen, want to do it. But
Yeah. And you've actually touched on one of the most, and thanks for reminding me, because that's an important sub point within the explanation of collectivism. Okay. So acting together as a group voluntarily is collective behavior, but that's collective and not collectivism. Okay. So voluntarily coming together as a group is an entirely different thing, because each individual that makes up that group is wishing to be there. And you might be wishing to be there within that group to work together for the same reasons. It might be for different reasons. Okay, but there's nothing wrong. In fact, I would even go as far as to say I would encourage that actually coming together voluntarily as individuals into that group setting is a fantastic thing, because that's when real synergy comes into effect. You put together all our different qualities and our different skills and abilities. And it's a little bit like that whole concept of the sum of its parts greater than the sum of its parts. So if you've got 10 people and they're all worth 100 points each, it should be 1,000 comes together as a group, but it's not. It's 500 million. That's the positive effect that comes together when you get that synergy of that working together of individuals. And that's great. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with collective behavior coming together voluntarily. But collectivism is the belief that we have an obligation, or there is an authority to determine things of how you should live your life according to the beliefs of a group. And in other words, you're coerced into that. And that is fundamentally self-destructive. And that's a pattern, for example, that we're bringing into our collective lives that is doing precisely that is bringing us down.
it's pretty ironic, isn't it, that we perceive democracy to be democracy when in reality the distortion is the complete opposite.
Yes.
It's like when we talk about it, like you were mentioning before, that could be like 30 million people, like their free will choice has been breached. It's jaw-dropping, isn't it, to think that we believe that that's democratic. That the 30 million should just accept.
Yeah, totally right. It's astonishing that we've arrived at this point. And actually, this is something that I've got into a little bit, and you, Damien, have got into it even more than I have in the sort of the demonstration of that in history. But just as a little offshoot from natural law, just for the moment, it appears, the more we look into it, the more clear it becomes that the sort of middle section of the millennium, around the 1600s and then going into the 1700s, was in a way a colossal psyop, really, for taking the authentic constitution as it was supposed to operate, where largely we would have been operating more like an individualist society, and shifting it, laying the groundwork during the 1600s and then through the Glorious Revolution and then into the 1700s of what has become the political system, and even more than that, the party political system, even worse. So coming to an understanding, gradually an erroneous understanding, that we govern ourselves. We don't govern ourselves. We are governed in this country by voting representatives into office, all on the basis of the number that vote. And it's just that really, in a way, is the downfall of a collectivist society. It's that belief, really, in the will of the majority, and then the sort of capturing of that majority by an authoritative government that then is put in place. And that's where we've gone. That's where it is. And that damage was done hundreds of years ago. But we're not likely to fix that quickly until that mindset changes, that people come to understand and realize that you don't actually have a choice in this. When I say natural law, what I'm actually talking about is reality. Yeah, you can't argue with reality. Now, the reason why, just getting into why this happens, why do we do this to ourselves? Because actually, this is why I hinted at the beginning, that humanity has got this kind of psychosis. And it all comes ultimately from fear. Yeah, so the collectivist is operating in fear because they're wanting to take control. Because there is an impulse, if you like, of fear that things will go wrong if we don't account for every eventuality. And that's the impulse behind legislating. It's imagining all of the possibilities that could come about in society, all the possibilities, different behaviors. Yeah, you're modeling different outcomes of human behavior. What you're trying to do, you're trying to legislate for every outcome and trying to predetermine what all of those things are going to be. And you can't ever do that. You're onto a hiding to nothing. You'll never be able to do that. And that's not how it's supposed to operate. And people who think like that, and let's face it, the powers that shouldn't be, the whatever you want to describe them as, they have that propensity to think like that all the time. They model everything. Think about it. Everything is modeled. Everything is digitized. We have to think about what will happen and plan for it. And we have to slice and dice it all the time and make a system out of it, systematizing things. All of that comes from this desire to control the future instead of the more feminine impulse, which is to go with the flow. This idea that you live more in the moment and then you deal with the outcome afterwards. So you can only really judge right or wrong behavior as to what has already happened. Has someone committed a crime? At that point, we look at it organically and we have some consciences on that. And you don't predetermine every outcome through legislation because you're going to be doing that forever and you'll never catch every possibility either. So you can see how the collectivist mindset has got that kind of fear at its base, wanting to control everything. And of course, actually, when you think about it, collectivism itself has two sides to it. It has one side to it, which is the powerful who like to take control. Those who have that impulse and it resonates with their ego. It resonates with that desire to control. Even if it's well-meaning, by the way, on the surface, it may be that those people have tricked themselves maybe into thinking that I have the best idea here for social organizing, that I've got policy here that's going to solve all these problems in society. Quite often, that's where it comes from, collectivism. Yeah.
It's occurring to me that if you have that collectivist mindset and you're in a position of power now, and then let's say there are a number of people in position of power, you could easily take that a step forward if you're planning for the potential future events to actually say, we will create those events to facilitate certain outcomes that fit the agenda that we're looking to follow. And I think at a high level, you only have to look at the world stage right now to see that seems to be what's happening.
Yes, absolutely. And you may find that planning for certain events in order to steer things in a certain direction might, at a stretch, you could even argue that they're doing it for a bigger reason. Okay, which is that they do fundamentally believe in that society is going to be cataclysmic in some way if we don't get the people to do this or move them in a certain direction or whatever it may be. But you have no moral right to do that. You can't do it. People have to be self-determining. You're right. That collectivist mindset takes a number of different subtle shades, different forms. You've got a scale of one end of people who are absolutely, I always joke about the white cat on the knee, the Blofeld figure in the James Bond movie, who are absolutely, completely cognizant of what it is that they're doing. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who genuinely are of the belief that what they are doing is the right thing for society, that actually they are trying to do. And by the way, the end of the 19th century was filled with that. If any of you who have read the books by Professor Carroll Quigley, who was the insider historian, who documented the inside history of the colonial times of Britain, the British Empire, and what was going on behind the scenes and the people who were really pulling the string. This was the British upper classes, from which I've a little bit from myself on the edges of, and I was frightened to spot, for example, even ancestors of mine, family names that I recognized within those lists of people. Now, what were these people? These people were just supposedly highly educated, had gone to some of the best schools, they'd gone to Oxford and Cambridge, and they were of that mindset that had a privileged upbringing, and there was a sense of guilt on their shoulders that they had to bring about conditions within society that were good for all. Right? There's that phrase, for the greater good. Okay? Look out for that when you see people talking about for the greater good. So you could say that at the other end of the spectrum of the white cat Blofeld figure, there might have been some of those, and I'm certain that there were, by the way, but actually the broader number of those people were probably quite well-meaning people, but were just screwed up. They'd got a psychosis that they felt that it was their job to solve society's problems. And we've still got that to a large extent in the establishment. Now, when you think of it like that, you start to realize, oh my God, this isn't really just a them and us conspiracy thing going on. It is a bit of that too. But to a very large extent, it's actually about a whole load of people, including those just our neighbors and friends in society, who actually just believe that they do know what they're doing and it's right that they should do it and put it all in place. So that's the other side of the coin of collectivism, is the giving that up, the energy of, yeah, I'm happy for the expert who know what they're doing, supposedly, to go ahead and put those policies in place. Yeah. So that's the landscape of collectivism. That's pretty much how it's operating. We could get more, if you want to, into the kind of psychosis that drives that. But that's really, I think, what's going on.
Well, on the psychosis, because I've been looking at natural law only on the surface. You talk about the mental illness. Is it the brain imbalance, left or right side imbalance, that kind of drives the master thing and the slave thing?
Yes, and exactly, and you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I've just described, isn't it? In a sense, is that the two forms of sides of collectivism, if you like, which is the master think, is rampant, out of control, masculine energy of control. And then this sort of the weak sort of handing away your sovereignty and your self-governance and only happy to do it, too happy to do it kind of mentality is it's the sort of the over gullibility of the over extended feminine energy, because it certainly shouldn't be like that. That's not how, feminine energy has massive qualities that we're lacking, that we're missing in society, which is seeing the bigger picture, pattern recognition, caring, the care principle, right? But the problem is there are aspects of femininity, which is also handing over your power as well. And when you have men doing that in society as well, which has happened a huge amount, and it's not entirely their fault either, because we've had a lot of programming and you're getting into some complex stuff about the gender problem and the way that's been manipulated too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The understanding of the masculine and feminine energy, which is one of the hermetic principles of gender, is really important. We're meant to be in that position where we combine or integrate both aspects of ourselves. So too much of the masculine leads to controlling, thinking. Too much of the feminine would lead to a kind of gullibility, if you like, and giving away of yourself. Yeah, and we're meant to be combining those two together, regardless of whether we are physically male or female. It's nothing to do with that.
As you're saying that, it just struck me. It just seems to me, again, that there are these multiple, not to get too conspiratorial, but there's these multiple agendas here that are dividing exactly that.
Yes.
And now it's obvious why that would happen.
Yes.
So it's everything that I see with what's happening is to take us further away from this objective morality, objective truth, and put us in that sort of infrastructure where, like you mentioned it, what happened is we've, over time, just been giving away that power to where it becomes, for a lot of people, this natural thing, whereby the idea of assuming that power for ourselves is almost like alien. Why on earth would we do it that way?
Yeah.
And to me, that strikes me as a pretty big problem, in that you've got a level of indoctrination there, hypnotism even. That how do you break that if a lot of the people there don't see that as a problem? They're walking towards their own demise.
Right.
happily.
Yeah, sure. And this, okay, so we should get into that. And what is that psychosis? What is the nature of it and how it manifests? But essentially, it boils down to the propensity for people to lie to themselves because they're in fear. So they don't want to face the truth. Okay, and because the truth is quite often dark and it's difficult to face, it's uncomfortable in some way. So as a result of that, what do people tend to do who are weak, who are somewhat cowardly? They will tend to arrive at the wrong conclusion that the best thing to do is to make up an alternative to reality, an alternative story to reality. And people might be surprised that we actually do this all the time. We all have a propensity to do this, and some more than others, of course. But it's that recognition within oneself. What I just said there to that person wasn't entirely true, was it? I slightly over-exaggerated that point there, or I played that thing down, or I justified something to myself, or I reframed a situation in my own mind to make me feel a bit more comfortable about why I took that action. So this is what I describe in my courses as micro-lies, which is justification, playing things down, over-exaggerating maybe one aspect of a story or something like that. These are all micro-lies, and we actually do it to ourselves because we want to believe certain things. Into denial. That's what it is. And there are all kinds of reasons, by the way, for that. There are all kinds of deep pain, hurt, childhood traumas, or even adult traumas that have created those situations and caused that. And it causes us not to be able to face certain things within us, or about ourselves, or about situations in our lives, or whatever it may be. And so what happens is we get very good at suppressing that. And we get so good at it that we don't even spot the fact that we're doing it. And it's when you don't see that you're doing it that you're effectively lying to yourself. And what that causes is a kind of fragmentation of the psyche. It's the most remarkable ability that we have for doing it, in fact, because you've got one aspect of yourself telling another aspect of yourself something that is actually a lie. And yet you deny the fact that it is a lie in the first place. And it causes this sort of fragmentation and separation. And I would urge people to get into this because this is the basis, really, of why we're in that we're in. Is because we have a propensity to lie to ourselves about uncomfortable stuff. Humanity does it all the time, which is what Carl Jung was talking about, the shadow. Hence, the need for all of us to do shadow work. Now, I'm not a psychologist, so you'll be careful. That's not advice, okay? I'm not in the legal profession.
It's like recognizing the small lies that we may tell and basically correcting it straight away when we
Straight away.
So
Right.
I know our perception can't always be aligned with truth, but making sure that it is for most of the time. So when we do come out of that, it's like recognizing it and aligning your perception back with truth. To do that, then it would lead to right behavior as well.
In becoming trustworthy to those around us. And you can't be trustworthy to people around you if you're not being honest and somebody of authenticity and integrity. Some of the worst people, and I often say this, some of the worst people in society or the most dangerous people in society are actually the nicest. On the surface are the most appealing because they're people, they'll agree with you in saying something and then 5 minutes later they'll agree with somebody else that's saying the opposite to you. And they'll just agree with it as well because they just want to be agreeable. They just want to be nice. They just want to be, but that's actually very dangerous. It's very evil behavior.
I found
actually
with most historians,
you're untrustworthy.
I found that with most historians, they'll say one thing, commentators on the law, and you'll go, yeah, that's fantastic. And then they'll say something completely opposite.
I know. We've had this conversation before. You look back, for example, and you read William Blackstone's commentaries or whatever it is, and you think, my God, on page 20, fantastic. This is great. He's a true individualist. He believes in individual rights and trial by jury and all the rest of it. And then 2 pages later, he doesn't even spot the fact that he's absolutely, completely contradicted himself. And it is riddled with true society. There are people at the top who are meant and the greatest knowledge, and they are lying to themselves.
Yeah.
You can see it. You just have to see it and read what they write. But you have to spot it. And that means we have to have discernment. We have to be discerning. We were watching David Starkey the other night or night before last, I can't remember. And I have to say I quite like the guy because he's a very talented recognizer of character. And whatever it was he was talking about, I remember thinking at the time, yeah, you're actually very astute in the way that you've understood that individual and the way that whatever it was. And he was explaining it very well and in a very amusing way. And I quite liked the guy from a stylistic point of view. And he's an interesting character. But actually, and I feel very sad about it, he's very contradicted in my view. He'll say things about the history and the Constitution and sort of very on the quiet want to believe in the truth and want to believe in natural justice. But then on the other hand, he's an absolute statist at the same time. And you can spot it. You can see it. If you're attuned to it, you can see it. And you'll see it in other establishment figures as well. Not only what they say on video, but also what they write as well. And it's basically contortions, mental acrobatics. It's something in life that all the way back from when they were at university, there'd have been something in the room was said. And they, as a new, fresh student, they would have looked at that and thought, oh, hang on a sec, that doesn't feel right. That feels like a little bit of a contradiction that he's just said there. Mm-hmm. But they haven't quite had the guts to call it out, right? So because they've let it lie, time has moved on and they've started to repeat that lie. It becomes a little bit of a bump in the road whenever they explain it, but there's a very slight discomfort whenever they come across that little subject or that little area of the subject. Doesn't quite hang together, logically. But gradually, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years into their career, and they're still doing it because they haven't pulled it out. It's like the elephant in the room. Everybody knows there's something a little bit awkward about that bit of the subject, but nobody's quite got the guts to say it or to bring it out until eventually they're in their 50s or 60s and they're hugely respected experts in their field. But actually, they haven't spotted, or they've at the subconscious level knows there's something a bit uncomfortable there, but they can't quite bring themselves to bring it out. That's the nature of it.
I think that's a really good place to leave it because for me, I do see the collective consciousness rising. The fact that we're here at this point where we're having this conversation, where you will are even on Neil Oliver, and it's been great watching Neil Oliver's journey in real time on the TV.
He really gets it.
Yeah, that to me says there's a mass awakening happening. And really what you just said there, Damon, that becomes an inevitability because you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yes.
So like you just said, it's just us keep beating the drum, putting the message out there, that collective consciousness grows, and eventually what we want will happen.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it there. Guys, thank you very much.
No worries.
Good talk, you guys. Take care. All the best.
Thanks, Will. See you very soon. Bye-bye.
Morality increases, freedom increases, and vice versa. That's absolutely a law and a dynamic that you see in the universe and how it operates.
Thank you for watching this special presentation. Due to the controversial nature of some of the topics in this discussion, we had to edit some parts out. To view the full uncut version, please visit us on X, where freedom of speech, uncensored opinion, and free thinking are the cornerstones of the platform.
Do you find the legal system overwhelming and wish you had the knowledge and skill sets to control judges, persuade attorneys, and win your case? Well, look no further. Sovereign Empowerment is proud to announce our partnership with Dr. Frederick Graves so that we can bring you the Jurisdictionary Law course, How to Win in Court, your ultimate resource for mastering the courtroom. Unlock powerful case-winning strategies as you learn to control judges like never before. This comprehensive course eliminates guesswork and empowers you to navigate the legal landscape with absolute confidence. With step-by-step instructions, flowcharts, and outlines, you'll have all the tools you need to persuade and control judges in any case or court. Learn from a seasoned attorney with over 40 years of winning experience, who has distilled his expertise into this comprehensive program. Access everything you need in one single package, including sample forms, video seminars, audio clips, and in-depth case-winning classes. Learn at your own pace, anytime, anywhere. Our 24/7 online access allows you to tailor your learning experience to fit your schedule. Access the course on your smartphone, tablet, or computer and become a legal master whenever and wherever you want. Benefit from a suite of powerful tools, including a free online legal research tool, a legal dictionary with common sense definitions, and an exclusive Q&A forum to connect with fellow students and obtain expert guidance. Good people have suffered too long at the hands of power because they just didn't know how to fight back. Now, in a matter of just a few days, you can acquire the tools and knowledge that takes law students years to achieve. Can't afford a lawyer? No problem. With the Jurisdictionary Law course, you'll gain the skills to win your case without expensive legal representation. Alternatively, equip your own legal consult with the tools and tactics to fight effectively on your behalf. Level the playing field and secure your victory. No matter what court, civil or criminal, conquer any courtroom challenge with ease. This step-by-step guidance ensures a quick and straightforward learning experience, empowering you to navigate the legal system with bulletproof confidence. As a testament to your newfound legal expertise, you'll have the opportunity to complete a final exam and receive an honorary law degree upon successful completion of the course. Showcase your achievement and establish yourself as a force to be reckoned with in the legal arena. Dr. Graves believes everyone deserves access to legal knowledge. That's why we offer the Jurisdictionary Law course at an unbeatable price. For less than the cost of a 1-hour legal consultation, you'll gain unlimited access to this complete program for up to 2 full years. Take control of your legal battles without breaking the bank. How to Win in Court has become the most trusted law course worldwide since 1997. Don't miss out on this exclusive opportunity to gain the upper hand in the courtroom. Enroll in the official Jurisdictionary Law course today and unleash your legal power. Click the link in the description below to become legally empowered today.